My name is Tony Strickland. I'm the mayor of Huntington Beach, and after, thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah. After I got elected and some of our team, Gracie Vandermark's here. Give her a big round of applause. I believe I heard Natalie Mosier somewhere here. Is she? Give her applause in the back. Thank you. And again, I firmly believe as elected representatives, our job is to be out in the community. I do not ever want to hear a constituent say you only come around during election time. And it's a big complaint that a lot of people have, and rightfully so. And so one of the things I said when I became mayor is I'm going to do a lot of these town halls, community coffees, mayor's mixers. I had a coffee yesterday. I think it's very, very, very important for elected officials to be in the community and get voices heard. We're not always, look, we have a lot of people here. We're not always going to agree 100% of the time. I don't agree with my wife 100% of the time. But I do think God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And I do believe there's a lot of times where citizens come up and give you unbelievable suggestions and ideas. And I would like to take those voices with me to City Hall. It'll make me a better mayor. It'll make Gracie and Natalie Mosier better council members to hear from the community. And I do want to thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedule. I really do. The most valuable commodity you have in your life is your time. It's something you can't get back. And there's a lot of other things you can be doing tonight. This shows you the commitment that we have here in Huntington Beach, that we have great citizens here who are deeply concerned about our quality of life here. So with that, tonight I thought it would be very important to talk about housing. It is one of the primary things that, quite frankly, I said that I was going to do if I was lucky enough to get elected, along with what they call the Fab Four. And I'm not trying to be political here, but I'm just saying we came out and we said the first thing that we're going to do is unleash Michael Gates and sue the state over the high density laws coming down from Sacramento. Look, I personally believe less government is better government, but government closest to the people's best interest.
Yes.
And what might be good for Fresno or Bakersfield or Sacramento or San Francisco is not necessarily best for Huntington Beach. And I don't like the one-size-fits-all coming down from Sacramento. And especially I don't like what's coming on from Sacramento in terms of the kind of mandate they gave to Huntington Beach. They gave us a mandate, the RENA mandate, of over 13,000 high-density units for low-income housing. And to put that in perspective, to understand, most high-density buildings will be penciled out 15 to 20% low income, but the other is market-driven. And then that actually does drive out the price of real estate in our town. But on top of that, if you understand how big that number is, you're talking about 40, 50, and even more high-rise, high-density apartment buildings here in Huntington Beach, and that dramatically changes what we are as a city. And I think this fight is fundamental, personally. I think it turns in Huntington Beach from the suburban coastal community into an urban center. And I always say there's nothing wrong with urban living. I almost moved to New York out of college. But I think a lot of people here in Huntington Beach like the suburban coastal community that it is today, and they don't want to live in an urban community. And that's why I've heard from most people. And I will tell you, a lot of our previous councils have done a remarkable job. We have done more than most in Orange County in terms of affordable housing. People forget that, but we've done more than most in terms of affordable housing. If you understand Huntington Beach, we're 95% built out, and the other 5% is in areas like the wetlands that no one wants to develop. And so for the most part, our past councils have done a remarkable job at building out the city in a way that we like here in Huntington Beach. And I will also be remiss to say, from my perspective, I don't think this is candidly all about affordable housing coming from Sacramento. In fact, if you understand the numbers, 95% of Californians live in 5% of the area space. And there's no incentives to build in that 95% in the state of California. In fact, the governor if you see him, he exempted his home county in Marin of these housing mandates. And if you understand that he's in the wine business, he also exempted Napa as well. And also Montecito, where Oprah Winfrey lives, they don't have any mandate. And I will tell you, San Bernardino County, for example, they want to develop, and the state's coming down and stopping them from development. And so I think this is a larger issue personally. I think it's an issue that says we don't like suburbs. I don't think there's an accident coming from Sacramento that we have the highest gas tax in the country. We have the highest car registration fee in the country. And when they spend money on transportation, they generally don't spend it on roads and highways. They spend it on things like the bullet train and mass transit. And they're trying to do whatever they can to get you out of cars. And they don't like suburban lifestyle. And I think California legislature wants to urbanize the state. And I will tell you, from my perspective as mayor of Huntington Beach, I will not let Governor Newsom do to Huntington Beach what he did to the city of San Francisco.
Yes, thank you.
And for those of you, I know some of you don't agree with me. We can agree to disagree without being disagreeable, but that's what our democracy is about. And quite frankly, the four of us campaigned on that issue, and we said, if you give us the ability to have a majority, we're going to do that day one. And that's what we did. Day one, we went forward and we talked to the city attorney. By the way, the best city attorney in California.
Yes.
And here in Huntington Beach, we're uniquely situated to do this fight. One, we're a charter city. It's in our Constitution. Number two, we do have an elected city attorney where he's on a fixed budget, where we can work him to death. Sorry, Kelly, we're working him to death. But he is also a homegrown Huntington Beach resident that loves Huntington Beach and absolutely has a passion for Huntington Beach. And it's a remarkable thing. So this is a fight that we're in for the long haul. If we have to go to the Supreme Court, we're going to the Supreme Court. We're in it for the long haul because it's fundamental. In my opinion, it's fundamental. It's fundamental about the quality of life of the people of Huntington Beach. And, this is what this fight is, and we're in this fight for the long haul. And I thought it was very important to have this housing town hall. So you've heard some things in social media. We're here to give you the straight scoop of where we are and where we're going as a council and also in our lawsuit. And so with that, again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you each for taking the time to be here. And without further ado, I want to introduce to you Michael Gates, who's done a remarkable job as our city attorney, and he'll update you both on our state and federal lawsuit with the state of California. Michael Gates.
Thank you, Mayor. So Mayor comes to me and says, I want to have a town hall, and I want to have a really good turnout. What do you think we should talk about? I said, housing. It's an important topic, and what we want to do is tell you kind of where things are in terms of, I'll just call it, the housing fight with California, because there's been a lot of newspaper articles written. There's a lot of information out there. A lot's being talked about on social media. I do what I can to, tell people where things are, what's going on. But it's hard to get that message out. So actually, the genesis of this was the mayor came to me and said, we're getting a lot of emails, a lot of questions. What can we do? Do you mind teaming up and doing a town hall? And I said, of course, I'm happy to. One of the things, as you may know if you saw me out on the campaign trail this last year and before, is I absolutely love and frankly adore speaking to the community directly. This is one of my favorite things, honestly, which is why I actually love campaigning. I know it sounds crazy, but when you do the job that I have and you're up in City Hall, locked up in an office doing legal work, or you're in the court, it's so nice and refreshing to come out and just talk to regular folks, right? And just talk to them about what's going on in the city and hear what they have to say. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you for coming out and being here with us tonight. And know that this is really, frankly, a pleasure for me, a privilege and an honor. So thank you so much for being here. One of the things I'd like to do is talk about the lawsuits, as the mayor said. We'll kind of talk about where the city is in terms of housing at the moment. I know there are lots of different opinions about housing policy, right? Should we have a highly progressive policy? Should we implement the will of Sacramento as it relates to high density development, Huntington Beach, things like that? This really isn't intended to be a debate about policy, right? And if you're welcome to ask questions after we give our presentation, and if there are questions about policy, I'm happy to let the mayor speak to policy. I really truly stay in my lane of the law, so I will talk about the lawsuits and the law, and I will answer questions on the law. One thing I do want to emphasize is I think there's a perception out there that, hey, we're doing this to try to Gates is doing this to try to prove something to Newsom, or that we're trying to give the middle finger to Sacramento, or whatever it is. And that really is not what we're doing here. What we're doing here, frankly, is doing everything we can to fight for Huntington Beach. When I go into court every day, I literally imagine the community behind me. I'm standing there representing the entire community, the city of Huntington Beach. And I'm there advocating for the best interest of the city. And every time I'm engaged in a legal battle, it's approved by the city council. They have to give me the green light. The council members on the campaign trail said unleash Michael Gates. There's a lot of truth to that. I can't do anything until they unleash me, right? Like, they literally have to approve it. The one thing you have to know, ladies and gentlemen, is I have never guaranteed a win. I don't guarantee wins. We don't guarantee wins when we practice law. What I guarantee is I guarantee my best fight for you or for the council's direction. I will give it everything I've got to fight for you in the court of law. Everything.
Thank you.
And being an officer of the court and having a tremendous amount of respect for the judicial system, I trust the courts, I trust the judges and the juries to make the right decision. And so I put forth my best effort as an advocate, and the system decides if I'm right or wrong, or if my client, the city, is right or wrong. But I don't guarantee wins. So, there have been comments on social media, oh, Gates, you're never going to win this, or why are you promising that, we're going to win this, or why are you fooling people into thinking we could win this? Look, I will say this, I'll get into the lawsuits in a second. I will say this, what we do, the arguments that we have, what we present to the court is very, very compelling, and it's legally sound. Else I would recommend to the city council, we cannot file it. We cannot file that lawsuit. I will also tell you, on the other hand, that we have won improbable lawsuits where I had actually counseled city council about our chances. And I won't get into how I counsel or what I say to city council, but I can tell you the outcome did not mirror the chances that I presented to city council. And yet council, for whatever reason, wanted to move forward with it anyway, and we happened to win. So I'm here as an advocate for the city at the direction of the city council, and I give it everything I got for you, ladies and gentlemen in court. And it's up to the system to decide if we win or lose. I just wanted to put that out there. I think it's an important point to make. So just to start, there is a state lawsuit, meaning the state has sued the city of Huntington Beach over housing. And then there's I call it the federal lawsuit, and Huntington Beach has sued the state in federal court over housing. So the state of California sued Huntington Beach, and I will say this, I believe I'll take a little liberty and characterize the lawsuit as largely symbolic, a lot of posturing and saber rattling, because the suit that they filed on March 8th had to do with violations of ADU law, violations of SB 9 law, and violations of builder's remedy under the Housing Accountability Act. All three of those categories were dealt with in part by the city council making an adjustment to their decision-making process, but partly too, they weren't even ripe. they weren't even ripe. They weren't ready to be adjudicated. In other words, the city hadn't actually violated anything. For instance, on SB 9, the city had never received an SB 9 application ever. We never denied one. Right? On builder's remedy, the state was alleging that we violated state law because we passed a builder's remedy ban. We had started that process, but we never finished it. And for them to file that lawsuit on March 8th, prematurely, speaks volumes of the type of lawsuit. It wasn't a serious lawsuit. Okay, that's point number one. Point number two, the state now seeing what I had been telling them, basically now has taken the position on that state lawsuit that we're going to dismiss all of those causes of action that we had in that lawsuit, and now we're going to insert a brand new violation of the city violating the housing element law. The city on April 4th, the city council voted to not adopt or approve the housing element update that was presented by city staff. That was city council's prerogative. Each member decided on their own what they wanted to do on that vote, and it failed. So the state then alleges from that point forward, April 4th, that the city is in violation of the housing element law because the city council didn't vote to update the housing element that night. Does that make sense? But what they're doing is they're now trying to take those allegations and insert it into the old lawsuit that they had filed in March. And that technically, there's a lot of technicalities when it comes to law, technically is improper. If you're going to bring essentially a new claim under new law with a new set of facts, you have to file a new lawsuit. Right? Now you may say, what's the difference? Because the state found out somehow that we were going to be filing our federal lawsuit on March 9th. So the state filed its lawsuit the day before on March 8th. There is a concept, if there are any lawyers in the room, known as priority, that if there are competing lawsuits in different courts, especially in federal versus state, that one may be stayed pending the other one that was filed previously. That's called priority. The problem for the state is the federal lawsuit, the lawsuit that the city filed against the state, was a challenge to RENA and the RENA mandates and the RENA methods against HCD and the state of California, having nothing to do with ADU law or SB 9 law or builder's remedy, nothing. So they literally were two completely different and disparate lawsuits. So the priority pursuit by the state doesn't really work, except they're trying to shoehorn it into working by now going into court and asking for leave to amend their original lawsuit so they can jam in a bunch of housing element violation claims, which, as I said, technically is improper. And we're going to oppose it. The hearing's on June 9th. You're all welcome to attend. Although there's probably far less sitting in the courtroom than here.
Don't worry.
You're welcome to attend. And we are going to take the position, or we're arguing to the court, look, the state can bring these claims all they want, but they have to file a new lawsuit. And if this court's going to amend this lawsuit to allow them to do what they're asking to do, then it should be being filed as of June 8th and not relate back to March 8th. So I kind of oversimplified it, but that's the status of the state case. Again, when I say state, I mean the state filing against the city of Huntington Beach in state court. That's the status of that case. Oh, Gates, you're losing. No, we're not. No, we're not. We're not losing. Nothing's changed. And in fact, people who are hypercritical of lawsuits and how they're going, it's really not fair to the courts. Allow the judges and the juries to make their determinations, please. I do. I may go out and say our case is compelling, but I'm not sitting there daring the court to make the right decision or anything like that, right? So I would ask the community to not jump to conclusions and to try to understand what's going on with these lawsuits. I just told you where the state lawsuit is and kind of that's the status of it. Let me jump to the federal lawsuit. So we filed that on March 9th, and the federal lawsuit is kind of like the mother lode of challenges to the state on its authority over housing mandates. And the reason I say that is because we allege a number of U.S. or federal constitutional violations, and then a number of California constitutional violations, and then a number of statutory state law violations. I think in all there's maybe 12 causes of action. I won't get into discussing the strengths or weaknesses of the case. I will say it's compelling. I think, though, that there are some really novel, key allegations presented in the complaint. Let me put it that way. Key allegations presented in the complaint. One of which is state law, the way it operates right now, state housing law, the way it operates right now, and this is pled in the complaint, so I can say this much. State law basically forces city councils, as they're approving and updating their housing elements and updating their zoning updates, right, their zoning enhancements, and their RHNA, the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, it basically forces them to go through a process or an exercise of doing an environmental review. And then when the environmental review is done, it presents a report that includes statements of the impacts on the environment. And that's pursuant to CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act. The environmental review is pursuant to that state law. State law requires an environmental review for any proposed project or zoning change that may impact the environment. Okay, it's real simple. CEQA requires City Council to conduct an the city to conduct an environmental review of any proposed project or zoning change that may impact the environment. So when that environmental report is presented to City Council, it details every impact on the city, every impact. If it's done right, if it's thorough, it presents every impact. There are negative impacts that can be mitigated. There are negative impacts to the environment that a project or a zoning change can be mitigated, right? So if a project's going to go in a certain location and the streets are narrow, the EIR, or the environmental impact report, may say, well, you're going to have such a new high concentration of traffic, the street's not wide enough. The city may say that we'll widen the street, right? You can mitigate the negative impacts to the surroundings or the environment. But then there are other things that can't be mitigated. And those are called substantial and unavoidable negative impacts to the environment. Well, in this case, the EIR presented a list of negative impacts to the city of Huntington Beach by the proposed high-density update to our zoning. The housing law says you have to pass a statement of overriding consideration in order to clear that hurdle, that CEQA hurdle, the environmental hurdle, to get to the nuts and bolts of implementing the housing program, the new housing program, the new zoning. Well, the statement of overriding consideration, when it comes to the substantial but unavoidable impacts to the environment, negative impacts to the environment, it basically has statements in there, and I'm painting with a broad brush, but it basically says, we're okay, we, the City Council, we're okay, the benefits of high-density development outweigh the negative impacts to the environment. Let me say that again. It basically says the benefits of the high-density development, the proposed high-density development that was presented by City Council, outweigh the negative impacts to the environment. And City Council basically has to accept that, right, to move forward with the process of implementing the housing update. And in this case, on April 4th, the City Council, including our mayor, said, I can't in good conscience say that. I've reviewed the environmental report. I see the substantial and unavoidable impacts. And I can't say the benefits of high density outweigh the negative impacts to the environment. It's essentially, ladies and gentlemen, forced speech. The city council is basically being compelled by the housing law that says you have to do CEQA, yes, but you also have to adopt a statement of overriding consideration, the speech, in order to move on with the implementation of updating your zoning. And so council members objected to that and said, I'm not going to have my speech forced. So that's the basis for the theory in our lawsuit that there are First Amendment violations. We have a whole host of other issues in there, due process violations, so on and so forth. But then I want to jump to the California constitutional violations. You hear all the time that we're a charter city. And what's interesting is a lot of people say, oh yeah, we're a charter, but who cares? Like it's some receipt in the drawer or something. Our city charter is very, very substantial. And it's a legitimate, it's more than legitimate. It is our highest authority for legal documentation in the city of Huntington Beach. Our highest authority. So it supersedes all resolutions, all ordinances. It's our highest authority. I am not saying it's the highest authority in the entire universe, right? There are state statutes, there are California Constitution, there's federal law, right? So there are those in our universe as well. But in terms of the local authority, our charter is our highest authority. What is a charter? A charter is a document that describes a form of government, and in that document, the city invokes certain rights. That document, ladies and gentlemen, is not only our form of government, it's also a declaration of independence from the state of California. It's not... It is not a categorical declaration of independence on all issues. But when a charter invokes local rights and authority, that comes from the California Constitution. That is not a right given to charter cities by the state legislature. It's a right given to charter cities by the California Constitution, Article 11, Section 5, that charter cities are entitled to engage and govern on matters of municipal affairs, and it literally says, free from state interference. Now, there's a whole body of case law and a bunch of cases about what is a municipal affair, right? So that now you're like, well, gosh, it's been crystal clear up to this point. Where's the catch? Here's the catch, right? There are courts litigating, or cities litigating all up and down the state of California and have for decades what is and what isn't a municipal affair. Local zoning since the dawn of time has been considered a local municipal affair. Now, local municipal affairs can be transmuted over time into matters of statewide concern, meaning the state then sort of takes over and has preemptive effect over local authority, right? So we recognize the power of the state. I want to recognize the power of the state, but without ignoring the power of charter cities. Charter city authority derives its power and authority from the California Constitution. That's really, really important. So when people want to say, well, it's just a charter, or what does it mean to be a charter city? It's actually a California constitutional principle. It's pretty significant. So, else, why would you adopt a charter? Why wouldn't you just be a general law city, right? So there are benefits to it. Where was I? So when it comes to preemption, the state does have total control over certain subject matter, right? And we recognize that. We are good stewards. We are good citizens of California, right? We're not just citizens of Huntington Beach on an island somewhere. We are good citizens of California. We recognize that the state has preemptive authority over waste management. The state controls absolutely every aspect of waste management. Education. State controls every aspect of education. And there may be, some exceptions, like local charter schools, but those are even charters pursuant to state authority, right? So, health is state and county, right? But when it comes to municipal affairs, for decades it's been local control, it's been charter cities. Local control, municipal affairs has for decades included local zoning. That's what I'm trying to say, local zoning. Local planning and land use decision making. It's also included controlling your own police department. It's also included collecting your tax revenue and spending it how you see fit. It's actually also included local elections. Those are enumerated as municipal affairs.
Libraries.
So if the state ever tries to come in and say, City of Huntington Beach, you cannot collect certain taxes or spend your money a certain way, that's a charter city violation, right? That's a municipal affair violation. So we do have some power and authority. And I think what's critical and important for the folks here who are interested in housing is housing has always been a local issue. Now, having said that, I will add this nuance in case there's some attorneys in the room. I also recognize that some state laws have always been a matter of statewide concern. Some state housing laws have always been a matter of statewide concern. But it's broken up in two categories. The state laws that basically say, hey city, if you're going to zone, then you have to have a general plan and you have to have a housing element and you have to update your housing element every 8 years and those are a matter of statewide concern because they affect every single city in California the same way without exception. And the state has an interest in making sure that there's some consistency across all cities in the way that they do their zoning, right? So we have regional compatibility. But what's different is state law has always recognized that setting aside process laws, that local authorities have been able to have their own discretion and determination over what is zoned, which is why the RENA issue is a problem because RENA is actually telling us what to produce. Huntington Beach, you have to zone for 13,368 units. And now there's a flurry of new state laws that it's going to be coming down that isn't simply that you have to zone for, but it actually says you have to build. Right? So now the state's telling cities what to do in terms of production. Production, as opposed to process laws, production has always been a local control issue. Local control. And that's why the recent laws that are now mandating certain production or certain outcomes is so offensive to charter cities, and that's why you see a lot of cities now suing over SB 9 and things like that, because those are production laws, right? City of Redondo has an SB 9 challenge that looks like it's good. And Huntington Beach now is challenging RENA in the same way because it's a production issue. It's not a process law, it's a production issue. Here's what else is wrong about here's what's flawed about the state's law as well, and these are in allegations in the complaint, so I'm not disclosing anything that isn't already public. If the state has preemptive authority over local, that means there's a state law that supersedes a local ordinance. There's a conflict between state and local. But what the state did wrongly, and hopefully they'll find out in court, is they outsourced, in essence, the RENA process to HCD. There is no state law on the books in Sacramento that says Huntington Beach has to zone for 13,368 units. There's no state law. It doesn't exist. So they can't claim, well, we have preemptive authority, that's our number, when they don't have a state law that conflicts with our local authorities. They outsourced it to HCD and SCAG. That's a problem when it comes to preemption. The other thing is when it's a matter of statewide concern, if the state's going to argue it's a matter of statewide concern, you can't have a matter of statewide concern if it doesn't affect the entire state. I think that's sort of a statewide concern. You can't exempt Marin County. You can't give Marin County special treatment. Napa gets to buy out of their RENA. Napa gets to get a number and then buy out of it. Say, oh, here's a couple $1 million. We're buying our RENA, right? City of Commerce is spelled out with an exception in the code as well. City of Commerce. So you can't do that. You also can't say that the mandates apply to high density areas or already developed areas like Huntington Beach, but without any incentives to build or develop in undeveloped areas. San Bernardino, as the mayor said, wants more housing, yet the state won't let them because there's environmental laws that protect Joshua Tree.
Come on, man.
Well, the state can't create its own conflicts of laws and then say one's a matter of statewide concern. You can't do that. It undermines that. And finally, there was an independent state auditor in the independent state auditor in 2022 found that HCD's numbers that they derived, or their methods and applications to jurisdictions with regard to allocating the RENA, wasn't supported by the evidence. Well, quite literally, the state auditor, the state agency, state auditor, independent auditor said HCD's approach was flawed, and its results or conclusions were flawed. How can that be a mandate? Your Honor, why should we have to follow that number if their state auditor, their own auditor, said it's a bad number? So there's a whole host of issues, and it's so bad that the state legislature actually took up the task of trying to reevaluate the RENA process, and actually now they're sort of scrambling to try to fix it, but it's too late. We've detailed in the complaint how they don't meet that standard of statewide concern, and I think it's actually extremely compelling. And I've heard from a number of very seasoned attorneys who have reviewed our complaint. And for the naysayers in Huntington Beach, I've seen on social media saying this is a ridiculous complaint, it's going to fail out of the gate, it's dead on arrival, blah, blah. That's fine, everybody's entitled to their opinion. But we've had some very seasoned attorneys say, this is incredible, we think it's a winner. So, we'll see. We will see what the courts do with it. Like I said, I really do trust the process as an officer of the court myself. I believe in what I'm doing, but I also believe in doing it to its conclusion and then finding out the result. Some confusion arose when the federal court in that federal case came out and said, we're denying the temporary restraining order. A lot of folks in the community, because of some of the way the newspaper articles were written up, said, oh, we're losing our case in federal court. No, we're not. No, we're not. There's a lot of things that we're doing as a matter of process that sort of set the stage for what's ultimately going to be adjudicated. One of them is the temporary restraining order. We went into court and said, Your Honor, basically there's an emergency here. Our council members' First Amendment is being violated by these laws. Please put a stop to it. And the court said, the judge said, I don't see a violation here yet. And he said a bunch of other things. I know his decision is out on the internet. He said a bunch of other things, but he articulated basically, too, the standard for even getting a temporary restraining order granted. Ladies and gentlemen, out of 100 temporary restraining order requests, like 1 ever gets granted. It's like 1%. Getting a temporary restraining order granted, the bar is very, very high. I didn't go in and request a temporary restraining order because I was absolutely certain it was going to be granted. One of the reasons you go in for temporary restraining order in a case like this is you can't honestly allege to a judge or a jury that our council members' First Amendment rights are being violated on an ongoing basis under these laws. And then let 18 months or 24 months go by before you get to the jury. The judge or the jury is going to say, well, what did you do to protect them the past 24 months if it was so violative of their constitutional rights? Well, in this case, now I can say, well, I went in for a temporary restraining order, but it was denied. Like, I tried to protect the First Amendment. I tried to protect the First Amendment rights. And that's often what you do with a temporary restraining order, is you go in as a matter of a procedural move or a tactical move and make the point to the court, our First Amendment rights matter, and I'm doing whatever I can available by the court to protect the First Amendment. It just so happened that the court didn't grant it because we didn't meet the high standard. And that's okay. That, ladies and gentlemen, is not a loss for our case. Even when the court articulates the standard that, you have to be able to prove that you're likely to prevail on the merits of the case in order to get the temporary restraining order granted. Likely to prevail. How can you prove that you're likely to prevail when all you've submitted is the pleadings? You haven't submitted any evidence, you haven't made any arguments, you haven't put on your case. So what I'm trying to say is the standard is very, very high, and that's okay. But it was important to me to go in and protect our constitutional rights, or attempt to protect our constitutional rights to the court. That's what that was all about. So an adverse ruling on something like that really has nothing to do with the case. Now, having said that, I make no promises about what the court's going to do. The court, out of the 12 causes of action, could knock out 3 or 4 and say those aren't meritorious here in federal court. They may be in state court, but they're not here in federal court, but we'll consider these other ones. Or the court could say, look, this whole thing, even though it makes federal allegations, it doesn't belong in federal court, it belongs in state court. The court could do anything it wants. I think there are compelling enough causes of action, compelling enough allegations, and compelling enough supporting facts to keep it in federal court. But I'm also an advocate, right? So I just want to make sure that the community knows that the denial of the temporary restraining order request is not fatal to the case. And I know there's a lot of armchair lawyers out there who haven't stepped foot in law school and love to be critical. I get it. You're out there. I love you too. But if you knew what it took to do what we're doing, and you knew what it takes in court, you would have a whole different perspective on this entire process. I can tell you what, and I can guarantee you probably wouldn't be an armchair lawyer behind a keyboard. Because it's really, really hard, and we take a deep dive into the law and we make incredible arguments. I was just at the Court of Appeal a couple of weeks ago in Riverside arguing. And so there's a lot involved. So that's the federal case, that's the state case. Okay, and then I'm going to let the mayor say a few more words, and then I think if you're willing, we'll open up to questions.
No, that's why we're here. So let's give Michael Gates a big round of applause. I don't know about you, but I felt like I went through a Pepperdine law class just now. Or Chapman or wherever. So, we are very blessed to have Michael. And in fact, Michael downplays some of this. He has to as a lawyer, but I will just say, just recently he got $25 million from the state of California winning the lawsuit from our redevelopment fund. So let's give him a round of applause. By way of reference, I always tell this to Kelly, and he doesn't like when I mention this. If this was in Newport Beach, for example, Newport Beach hires outside counsel, and they win that $25 million, they get a contingency fee. So Michael would have got $13 million if he was in Newport Beach. Sorry, Kelly. But anyways, let's give him another big round of applause. He does a great job. And I just want to tell one quick story, and then again, I want to hear from you. For those of you that don't know my background, I did have the privilege to serve in the California State Assembly 6 years. I was Republican caucus chair, and then I also served in the state Senate. I just want to share one quick story, because I hear a lot from folks that you can't sue California and win, and it's so daunting. And I will tell you from personal experience. Anybody remember the energy crisis? Raise your hand. Yeah, when we had rolling blackouts. Well, at that time, I was a 29, 30-year-old state assemblyman, and at the time, Gray Davis was campaigning in New Hampshire, and people were talking about him being the next president of the United States, and it made sense because he was the governor of the largest state and the most prolific fundraiser in the Democratic Party. He was incredibly popular, but he refused to disclose what we're spending on energy contracts, these 15, 20-year energy deals. And so I took him, I actually wrote a letter and asked him to release the information, because I said, look, this is not your money, it's not my money, it's the people's money. We have a right to know how much money it's cost to keep the lights on in the state of California. So he looked at me as I was the youngest member of the legislature, and nice little boy, go away, and he used a term called executive privilege. I'm not really releasing that information. And so I did the only thing I thought I could do at the time. I took him to court in a lawsuit, Strickland v. Davis. And I remember like it was yesterday. You can visualize this with me. the Democrats get together and Republicans get together in Sacramento, and we're in the Republican caucus. And I walk in, it's a small room, and I walk in, and you can visualize again, I'm the youngest member, and I go, I'm suing the governor of California, who's with me? And to say I didn't get a warm response is an understatement. In fact, a lot of my colleagues, my Republican colleagues, stood me outside afterwards, they put their arm around me, and they said, look, Tony, this is the governor of California. If you go forward on this lawsuit, you're going to be the worst office in the Capitol, which I ended up being. He's going to veto every piece of legislation you have. And we think you have a bright future in politics. You're going to end your career before it gets started. Now, that's my Republican colleagues telling me that. And that was gut check time. But I knew it was the right thing to do. I went forward. Not only did we sue the governor, we won in court. And the judge ordered the release of those documents. And what we found out was the governor tried to lock in these 15, 20-year energy deals at a higher price than the worst price in the spot market. If you remember Enron and a lot of those Duke Energies. So they got bad PR, and they went back and they renegotiated those contracts, and we saved ratepayers, all of you, billions of dollars, with a B, for the next 15 to 20 years, because we went forward in that lawsuit and won. Now, the reason why I share that story, it's exactly the kind of leadership we need here in Huntington Beach, because I feel like I've been through this, and we do get threatening letters from the Attorney General and the Governor all the time. And I will tell you, if they think Michael Gates had a case, do you think they would send those threatening letters?
No.
No, they wouldn't care. Look, Michael's right. You never know what's going to happen in court. But, again, we believe this is a fundamental fight for the quality of life of Huntington Beach, and the fight's worth having. So that's why we're here tonight. Thank you. So with that, we have a podium here. If you want to come up and ask a question, if it's a technical lawyer question, it's going to go to Michael. If it's more of a policy, I'll answer it. And in fact, maybe bring in Gracie. No, she doesn't. Go ahead. Yeah, please. And then if you want to announce yourself, but you don't have to. The mic not work?
Now we're live. Mr. Gates, question for you. Thanks for the explanation on the arena mandate. Two questions related to that. With HCD, is that the same process that's used throughout the state? And since we're pointing out that it's flawed, should we expect that other cities will also challenge that in court?
So that's a really good question. It's equally flawed for each city, for other areas and regions throughout the state. So yes, I think we've gotten dozens of phone calls about what we're doing, how can we join from other cities. And what we're finding is that cities want to join. They look forward to filing like an amicus brief, like a supportive brief. But as the mayor said, a lot of them don't have a pretty robust in-house attorney team. A lot of them have to outsource. So they're all doing the calculations, and they're like, joining your lawsuit could cost us, $300,000 of new money, new cost for them, right? Because it's a new project for an outside law firm. So a lot of them are kind of doing that cost benefit, and they're like, well, if you win Huntington Beach, we win. So why would we spend $300 to join you when if you win, we win? So that's their calculation, but there's a tremendous amount of interest and support, and I've had a number of talks with other mayors and other city council members from other cities.
Yeah, please. If you don't mind, I'm going to add something. I'm a board member of the ACCOC, which is like the League of Cities for Orange County. I can't tell you, and Gracie knows this, but there's so many other cities that have said, way to go, we want to be part of it. But there's also a little part there of us being the charter city, and we want Michael Gates to take the lead on this, and the more people come in. The last thing you want is a zillion lawyers like second guessing each other. That's one. Number two, we have such a high number here in Huntington Beach, and some of the other cities don't have the same kind of arguments that we have in terms of being a charter city, our own city attorney, and that. But I will tell you, we've had countless of cities up and down the state of California calling me and calling Gracie and others saying, way to go, because what's good, when we win this race, when we win this lawsuit, it's not only going to be great for Huntington Beach, but it's going to be great for local control in California.
And for those who have questions, I just want to point out too, if you have a policy question and the mayor has an answer, fine. What I'd like to try to avoid is a debate about which way the policy should go. There's no point in debating that tonight. This is meant to be informational. So.
Hello. I have a couple questions. First, I kind of thought we were going to hear something about what our substitute housing plan is, and I really haven't heard anything about that. And I was wondering if you could routinely update the citizens of the committee on how much this is costing us over and above your salary or the city employee salaries, including fines that the state has put on to us. And also a comment is I would like to not hear us equated to San Francisco. It is clearly a city and we are clearly a suburb. So quit doing that.
All right, so thank you for that. So politely I'll say,
Hold on, that's a pause. We can agree to disagree without being disagreeable, but San Francisco is a good point because the city is messed up, and Gavin Newsom did mess it up. So, but anyways, that's just again point of view. You might be different than that. I respect everybody's voice and opinion. Please, go ahead.
Hello, Mayor Strickland.
Wait, excuse me, did you answer the question that the lady, she had several questions.
Louise, I was going to ask that very same question.
Okay, great.
As a matter of fact. But first I wanted to, and thank you, I guess we don't have a 3-minute limit. This could be dangerous, huh?
Hold on now.
All right.
Hey, if you go longer than 3 minutes, I'm sure the crowd will have more problems than I will.
Yeah. Regarding the arena numbers that we've been allocated, included in that, no, I think it's more for Mayor Strickland. Okay. There's an above moderate income level that I don't know if it qualifies as affordable. It's affordable for above moderate income people. 5,215 units of the 13,000 are above moderate. And typically, Huntington Beach has exceeded their allocation over various cycles. So I think it's important to distinguish that between affordable units and even moderate income units. There's 2,300, I think, is the allocation. Anyway, so my question is, I did expect to hear a housing plan, and I'm very concerned about loss of revenue related to not having a housing element and how we might make up any funds that may be lost as a result of that. And I expected to hear, how are we going to address the housing needs of people in Huntington Beach at different income levels?
Well,
without a housing element.
There's a lot of questions in that.
So the last one is really the follow-up.
Okay. Well, first, if you remember in my opening statement, I did talk about previous councils doing a good job over a long period of time, and we've done more in Huntington Beach than a lot of other cities around Orange County. That's number one. Number two, we will be discussing as a council in terms of a housing element. It just might not meet the state standard of the housing element because, again, that housing element, one is, we believe it's astronomical and not practical for the city of Huntington Beach, number one. And number two, again, as Michael Gates said, not only did the city sue, but I put my own name on that lawsuit, and I know Gracie Vandermark put her own name on that lawsuit because it is a First Amendment right. I do not believe that the governor's mandate is more important than all the mitigations that you normally have to do in terms of environmental review, in terms of noise and traffic and everything else. So I don't go along with that statement of overriding consideration. So those are the answers I have. We will, as a council, talk about maybe moving forward on housing element. But I will tell you, I am not going to sign off on a statement of overriding consideration, which is required by the state. And clearly, I'm not going to sign off on that kind of a number for the city, because I do believe that urbanizes a suburban community that wants to be suburban.
And just to follow up in terms of, there was a brief reference, and I lost my questioner, to cost. So in-house, it costs nothing more to have me work harder. Well, my wife may disagree that there's no cost in having me work harder, but there's no additional cost to the taxpayer. In full candor, in full transparency, with these lawsuits, we may need to hire some experts to come in and talk to a jury about the economics of it all, or what effects high density has on the environment. So we may get to that point. Those experts will cost some money, but there's no additional litigation costs beyond that are known. In terms of penalties, there's a lot of scare tactics out there about $100,000 a day or whatever. Look, nothing can be imposed on the city by the state in terms of monetary punishment until a court finds in their favor. And then, depending on which statute the court invokes in finding in favor of the state, we may have up to a year to cure the defect before anything's assessed on the city. So there's a lot of fear-mongering about, big dollar signs and hundreds of thousands of dollars and maybe millions of dollars. Look, it's not like that. Let the process play out. We'll hear from the courts, and we'll see what happens.
Okay. Well, there are 3 points. My name is Mr. Amory Hanson, and there are 3 points I wish to make. Number 1, the 13,000 units allocation is a bunch of malarkey. Number 2, the 2 is a concern about the low income is the fact that because of certain rules both at the city and state level, many developers are able to use in lieu fees to avoid creating low and moderate income housing, which results in us building a ton of housing but no benefit that the state wants in terms of allocation of the housing. The last point I'm going to make relates to the over 3,000 mobile homes that are here in Huntington Beach that apparently don't count toward the allocation, which is unfortunate. So would love to hear a little expounding on that if desired. If not, that's okay. So.
I think you said it pretty well. You've clearly done your homework. So well said. That's what I'll say to that. In terms of the cost of living too, again, I don't want to get into a policy debate. This is just a fun fact I think that gets lost on a lot of folks. Just in the past few years alone, the cost to develop a dwelling unit has gone up $100,000 because of all the bureaucracy, environmental regulations, and red tape imposed by the state of California. Yeah. So when we talk about cost of living, how can we overlook that additional $100,000 per unit because of all of the state regulations? So again, if the state was serious about affordable housing, one would argue, maybe a policymaker, then they would start cutting the bureaucracy and the red tape and the rigid environmental requirements and allow development to occur without resistance.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you very much for having this forum. It's important for openness in government. I think the two fundamental principles underlying your case beyond quality of life are freedom and private property rights. I think that legitimate property owners own their property by right, not by permission. If the government ever decrees that we own our property by permission only, that means the government can dictate what we can, what we cannot do with our property. So if we're gonna be submissive and subject to the dictates of government as far as our property, that means we've lost our freedom. So private property rights and freedom beyond quality of life are what at stake here. Thank you.
Unbelievably well said. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jonna Stopnick, and I'm actually here to, two things that really struck me. One is when Mr. Gates said the thing about how the state filed on the 8th versus our filing on the 9th. And then the other thing I want to talk about is families in the city of Huntington Beach. And my last name is Stopnick, and our family moved here, my husband's family, moved here in the 1950s. And we've had over 100 people. You know, I'm the mother of 5, grandmother of 8. My husband's brothers, they all had like 7 kids, one, you know, another one had 3. Anyway, we raised our kids here. I've lived in Huntington Beach for 35 years. And, but I'm the last one, and we're getting evicted out of the city of Huntington Beach, and we'll be gone on July 3rd. And we raised our kids here. We had houses in the Hamptons. We did all these things, paid taxes, sent our kids to Huntington Christian School. You know, our nephew's married to Lindsay Pye, the daughter of Aaron Pye, who owns Huntington Surfing Sport, a dedicated surfing family in this community. And now we're being priced out by $7,500 price increases, which comes to the corruption issue. What I feel is happening is this subterfuge. It's happening with the builders, the developers, and the property management companies, and in particular UDR, which is this $23 billion company out of Colorado that manages Pacific City, residences at Bella Terra, and Beach and Ocean, among others in the area. They raised our rent $7,500 without notice in January, and now, you know, we're being evicted. I've got a lawyer, so we're getting, you know, not technically evicted, but we really have to flee Huntington Beach, and it really is terrifying, you know? I mean, it's like, I worked all my life in technology and supported my family, you know, of 7, and, you know, we did all these things, and now I'm 61 years old. I'm a recent widow. My husband died in January of last year, but, you know, still, it's a year, and I have a daughter living with me, and her and I are, basically, we don't know where we're going on July 3rd. And I thank Mr. Gates, because I actually did send him a message, and he has had me send some stuff over to his office. But I just feel like this pincher move that's happening, because I got involved at Residences of Bella Terra when they were putting in the new building project that's going in over, what's that place? Burlington Coat Factory. And I went down and I talked to people that were the developers. And I feel that this is like a retaliation against me, as well as being politically involved. I mean, Gracie, I talked to you. I mean, when you guys were trying to get elected, I really wanted that to happen because I didn't want to see this happen to Huntington Beach. So I feel this pincher move that's happening, if you will, is going after people. And we know that there's political operatives. You guys have seen it all in the city council, right? There's people, like when I was out doing the voting monitor thing, you know what I mean, where you go in and you do the poll watching. You know, doing that, I could hear the other voices of people watching other people. There's just so much subterfuge that's happening in Huntington Beach. And I guess my question is, are you guys really aware of all of it? And are you going to do anything, like, are you just going to let all these family, I mean, it's not just our family, I know, you know, we're scattering to the ends of the earth, whether it be England or Utah or Hawaii or wherever we can go. But it's like, we're this exodus, you know, after living 35 years in Huntington Beach. So is there anything that we can do to keep our families here?
Whatever your case may be, you know, if there's something that's illegal or needs to be addressed, you're welcome to send an email to me, as you did. And just for anybody, I'm happy to be the conduit to other departments, whether it's code enforcement, but even the district attorney, if there's anything that can be done. I'm not suggesting that in your case there could be, but if there's anything that I can do to help connect you with the right resources, I'm happy to do it. And I know the mayor and the city council is as well.
Just one other thing to that though. I guess my bigger point in that was about the subterfuge that's happening. Like, are you guys aware that the developers and that they work together with people that are property management, and that they intentionally try to get like longtime residents like me by these rent increases? They try to get us online to go talk about rent control in Huntington Beach, for example. So what I'm saying is they're trying to get the citizens against what you guys are doing by forcing us with things like evictions and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, and I know we see a lot on our end, and for every one email, for every email like yours, I get 100 others, right, from residences and residents. And so we follow up on everything, we pursue everything, we do know a lot, and I'm certainly, it's unfortunate your circumstance, but I appreciate everything that you said tonight.
I'm really sorry to hear about the loss of your husband. I'm really sorry to hear the loss.
I happened to notice today that the city of Huntington Beach is doing some hiring, and I looked at the salary ranges. And if you look at the very bottom of the list of the range, possibly that person could not afford to live here, because most of the apartment complexes or places you go to rent require you to have a $75,000 minimum salary to even fill out an application. So when you look at the salary range that our city's offering, or if you look at, for say, I'm a starting teacher in the Huntington Beach City District, or I'm a starting teacher in Ocean View, we can afford to live here. And I don't see anybody talking about the importance of us creating some kind of workforce housing. And I was really disappointed at a council meeting several months ago when one of our council members said, they could just drive an hour and a half to get to work. I don't always think that's the answer. I would think that we would want our city employees and our teachers and our school bus drivers and our maintenance yard workers to actually live in our city. So I would like to know that at some point we are going to address some kind of a workforce housing, and could we even find out how many of the city employees actually do live in the city? Because again, I was at a city council meeting when one of the staffers who was reporting, she said, I don't live in this city because I can't afford it. And people in the audience booed her. And I thought, for crying out loud, she works for your city and you don't have any provision to see that she can even live in your city. So I'm hoping that as we go forward, we consider the fact that we would like to have our workers actually be able to live where they work. And I don't think that's an unreasonable request.
Hear, hear.
If I could just respond, you talked about people coming in and starting out. I will tell you, my first job was working as a field rep for Assemblyman, and I got $1,000 or $500 a month. It's starting out, and I didn't get to live in that city that I worked in either. But what you did is you got good experience, and you drove, and quite frankly, for those of you I went to college, like I lived on top ramen. Sometimes when you start out, you build up your ability to have affordable. You live where you can afford. And I will tell you, we will look. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we live in Huntington Beach. Go up and down the coast. We live in probably the nicest place in the world. And if you look at coastal communities, let's walk them through. Santa Barbara, Malibu, Manhattan Beach, Huntington Beach, Newport, San Diego, Dana Point. Almost all those areas are very expensive. It's a supply and demand. There's so many people that love to live near the ocean. And the closer you get to the ocean, the more expensive that property is. Like it or not. And at the end of the day, we will look into things, because we do want people not to spend 2-3 hours on the road. But I always say, look, I'm for development, but I'm not for the kind of high-rise, high-density development that the governor's coming down and trying to push down on our city, because it changes the dynamic.
And I do just want to add that the legal battles that we have in court, they are not a policy They don't take a policy position. What they're saying is local control is paramount. State laws violating local control and violating the Constitution. That's what that's about. It's about local control. So if cities want to have progressive housing policies, they can. But those should be local decisions. So the comments that are made here about, we should have more housing and more workforce housing, okay, fine. That's a debate that you can have with policymakers and come up with the right policy, but it should be decided at the local level and not by the state of California.
Thank you so much for this, and thank you for the explanation of the charter cities. I had no idea. I'm a refugee from Los Angeles. I'm a happy relocator. And speaking as a native Angelino, we had high-density housing. We had road diets. We had rent control. We had the wonderful mix of what is supposed to make the most beautiful and wonderful city. We had no green spaces at all. For all the preaching, there was no green space. That was run over with high-density housing. They imposed the rent control on all mom and pop owned buildings and mobile homes, and they're all gone. And who came sweeping in for the fire sale? The big developers that wanted the high-density housing. So that's why I think we have to be very careful about that. If we cannot win this fight, then we absolutely have to impose rent control on the developers in the high-density housing. Because the 20% they're talking about, that's not middle class. That's Section 8. And those are incomes well below what we all enjoy here, or don't enjoy here. But really, it only exacerbates things. And the density increases, and pretty soon we're not going to have Central Park. I can guarantee they want to put condos all around there, and we're not going to have any wetlands. And that's one of the more beautiful things. We don't preach it, we do it. And that's why I'm going to hopefully stay in OC for the rest of my life.
Okay, this is part policy, part legal, but the state imposing all these rent controls over everybody is what driving people to ask for high rent and to ask for $75,000 that the person would make to qualify for an apartment, because they made it virtually impossible to evict anybody. So any landlord, no matter how low the rent is, they have to make sure that somebody can make the payment, otherwise the landlord cannot make the mortgage payment. So when people say we have to have so much income to qualify, that's the state policy that everybody has to oppose, and they should not cheer Newsom for putting rent control on everybody. They should oppose rent control, because when you leave it up to the market, good landlords give starter families or individuals the chance to come in and live if you keep a nice, clean home, even if you don't make a lot of money. But if you are faced with you can never evict them, they can live there for free, and you're still liable for everything, and they can sue you on top of that, then you don't want people to come in unless they have tons of money in the bank and make a lot of money. That's your only, and pretty soon they're going to take that away too. So anybody who thinks that rent control or low income is good, it's not. You leave it to the free market, and then everybody gives somebody a chance. But that's
Just a quick comment, slightly different. When it comes to the state attempting to regulate markets, like that comment, I defy anybody in here, and if you can show it to me, I'll look at it, I'll read it. Show me the data or the study that shows that these high-density mandates, which increases the supply of housing in our local jurisdictions, results in actual affordable housing. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. So that's another challenge to the statewide concern issue. The state legislature, in its law that preempts local authority, has to accomplish its goal. It's not going to be able to.
Okay, so we're going to freeze the line here, the last four speakers, because 10 to 7, we promise we'll be out by 7. So, next 4 speakers, and then we'll conclude. Go ahead.
2 questions. Number 1, yes or no, are we a sanctuary city?
Sanctuary from what?
Well, what I'm getting at is we have quite a few people crossing the border. I understand there's quite a few coming to California. Do we have a plan?
Well, that's a different topic. That's next week's town hall.
It does cover housing.
And I can let the mayor speak. That's all policies. I'm gonna let the mayor.
It sounds like I have my subject for my next town hall. No, I don't know about the sanctuary.
No, and the issue is when it comes to immigration, the city has no controls, right? That's a national and arguably, in some respects, a state issue, not a city issue.
So we are or we aren't a sanctuary city?
So if you're talking about specifically SB 54, which is the sanctuary state law, Huntington Beach challenged that law as a charter city. Huntington Beach won, and hold on, the story's not over. We won, and we were actually exempted as a sanctuary city, so the sanctuary state laws did not apply. But then the Court of Appeal reversed, and I can show you the opinion. The court, in my humble opinion, applied the wrong analysis and the wrong standard. And I will say this, because it's being recorded. The Court of Appeal applied a standard that the state Supreme Court never applied. The state Supreme Court has never applied the 4-part VISTA analysis to a subdivision B case. So you just have to take me at my word. I know we're being recorded, so I had to clarify what I mean when I say the Court of Appeal applied a standard that the Supreme Court had never applied, and when it applied the standard that it did, it came to a different conclusion.
So does that mean no?
Currently, no.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Are we going to the Supreme Court?
I'd just like to kind of take issue with something you said about people have to be willing to commute into Huntington Beach if they want to work here. I think that's...
Hold on. I did not say that. I said startup jobs, a lot of times, people have to go in and they can't afford work. I couldn't afford to go into the first job I had either. I want to make sure I clarify that, because I didn't say everybody, I don't care if you come. Look, I want more housing. But I want suburban, coastal community, suburban feel to that. And quite frankly, that's my job and the rest of the council's job, not the governor's job, to decide that. So the answer is, I do want people to be able to afford a place in Huntington Beach, but I also know, as I stated, that when you're in a coastal community, the properties are a lot higher because it's a desirable place to live. That's what I said. So go ahead.
Okay, I think we're at risk of changing the nature of Huntington Beach, because if you look at it, we're closing elementary schools because young families can't afford to live here. And I think that's part of the problem.
Well, I would cut you off. A lot of elementary schools throughout the state are closing down, and I think it's because of kind of the curriculum that they're putting in.
Yes, that's why I left.
You don't want they don't like the curriculum. And so if you look at charter schools and you look at private schools, their enrollment's way up. Just so.
Exactly. Absolutely true.
I haven't seen that data. Let me make one more point. I think when we approve hotels in the area or other businesses that are going to have a high worker population, we need to ask those businesses to do something about housing. You put up a hotel that has 700 employees, they need to live somewhere, otherwise they're on our roads, and obviously the state doesn't want to see people commuting 50 miles because that burns gas, it's not good for the environment and everything else. So I think in our planning, we've got to look at how many more people we're trying to put into Huntington Beach for businesses. Thank you.
That's a privilege to live in the city where you work.
Party of 3.
Where they go?
Mayor Strickland, my name is Alfonso Aguilar. Live on Brush Drive here in Huntington Beach.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you. We're currently making our garage into a junior ADU. I know you didn't touch much on this topic. A few months ago, we went to submit our application to find out that they were no longer accepting ADU applications. We'd already paid the architect thousands of dollars to do the plans, and then the bad news was they said no more junior ADUs. So we adjusted the plans, paid them again. Then a couple weeks later, find out the city accepting applications again. So I got to pay the guy again to change the plans again. My son is getting older, and he was thinking of moving to another city because he can't afford to live in Huntington Beach. So I said, hey, I'll fix the garage, make it a nice little unit for you and your girlfriend. Stay in Huntington Beach, stay with us, with your mom and dad, same property. What are the plans as far as the city changing to not accepting applications for junior ADUs?
Well, we're accepting ADUs at City Hall right now, currently. And
I'm just trying to avoid any surprises because
and
nobody said anything when
quite
I went.
frankly, ADUs are part of that housing element that we're going to be talking about moving forward. So I don't foresee it changing in the near future.
Okay, I'm just trying to predict, do I have to pay the architect again to show up to the city and say, hey, sorry, we're not taking applications again? So,
And you want to?
so as of now, there's no plans on not accepting applications?
No, they're accepting applications. Go ahead.
Okay, and there's no deadline on that?
No.
Okay, just wanted to clarify on that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Quick question, and that is...
Save the best for last?
I hope so.
Okay, thanks for being here.
No problem. It's great to be here. Thanks for doing this. Michael, you weren't able to get your stay through the court with regards to facts around the lawsuit that's been filed, but we still are subject to SB 9 and SB 10, and so I would assume. And so what set of rules are we working from currently with regards to properties that are being zoned or purchased and so forth? What is the system that applies to current development that is moving forward because of where we find ourselves in this delay between when we get this court case completed versus where we are today? What is the set of rules that we are all working from in the meantime?
Yeah, if I were to go through them all, we'd be here for a few hours. Well, we're accepting SB 9 applications, we're accepting SB 10, we're accepting ADUs. The SB 9 and ADU challenge was dispensed with in the state case, so that's not at issue. So I think the environment within which development and applications occur, it's standard and status quo. Our challenge on the RENA issue is going to proceed in federal court, and that's going to take some time, some months. The city council did not adopt an updated housing element with 13,368 units of high density housing. So that's the status. That's where we are.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank all of you for taking time out of your busy schedule. Let's give Michael Gates a big round of applause. I want to thank Matt Liffering, who's in the back, and Jen Carey, and staff of the city who helped set up for today and record for today. Thank you. And most of all, thank you each and every one of you for being here. I know I'm going to leave my business cards over here. Please email or call me if you need me. We're going to be doing a lot of town halls, a lot of community coffees, mixers with the mayor. And then let's give Gracie a big round of applause for being here. And we brought Holt in the back to give her applause. I know Gracie will probably put her cards out there as well. Again, thank you all for being here, and I really hope you all have a wonderful day, and God bless Huntington Beach. Thank you.
This is really cool. We had the mayor come here and speak with the city attorney. We had them talking about the lawsuits that the state currently has against the city of Huntington Beach, as well as the city of Huntington Beach suing the state. So we had a really cool turnout, a lot of people here. And again, if you want to hear what, especially what Michael Gates said about our city being a charter city and the rights that we have as a charter city to fight and battle on behalf of Huntington Beach representing local control, he talks a lot about it. Again, there's a lot of people here today, and most of it was pro the conservative movement that's going on here in Huntington Beach. And look at this, we got them talking to a lot of the city residents coming up to say hi and saying hi. So this is pretty cool. I love that this city had this turnout. This is bigger than any of the city council meetings. So again, it was a good day. It's a good day to be here and hanging out with our people from the city.
Ladies were talking so much.
Oh yeah, and we got to sit behind a couple libtards.
They called that lady that was concerned about a sanctuary city. They called her. They were like, "What a racist woman is that she wants, borders. That our country should have borders."
I think they were clearly white women, but they were white liberal women who.
I wanted to ask them what they thought of Gracie, so we could call them racist.
But you know what? They got up and left. They didn't even want any of what I would have turned the camera on. I would have asked them questions. It was get the thing out of my face.
This was heavily a fan.
So yeah, this is it's good to. Yes, I like coming here and just like doing this. This is fun, seeing this kind of turnout. It's a good turnout, right, Hyde?
Yeah, the place is packed.
Place is packed. Good energy.
Like 3 cameras going. I don't know if
Yes, it's starting up again. So yeah, people are becoming active and participating in at least this city is. So we are very fortunate to have people that are fighting on our behalf. Thanks, and you guys have a good night, huh?